What is good, everyone? Welcome to the Coast to Coast podcast here on InsideCarolina.com. I'm your host, Joey Powell. We're brought to you by Johnny T-Shirts. Appreciate you guys being a part of the show tonight. Happy that you're here. Lots of stuff to talk about. I know if you think our last two episodes have been kind of lean, I should say our regularly scheduled episodes have been kind of lean. We did have two commitment pods as UNC added a couple of guys, but this one is going to have you stocked like a 40 refrigerator in a Dr. Dre video. Um, this was going to be cram full. We got offers to talk about. We got EYBL and first live period to talk about, and we got UNC transfer portal news to talk about. So, what other better way to do this than to bring in Sean Moran and Sherrell McMillan, the two fellows that always bring the knowledge here on the show on the Coast to Coast. Happy to have them here. Sherrell, I'm coming to you first, man. UNC added Harrison Ingram and Cormac Ryan last week to go with the previously committed Paxton Wojcik and Jalen Withers. That leaves the Tar Heels now with two scholarship spots going into next season. What I'd love for you to do right now is for all the peeps who are tuned in, whether it be audibly or visually, reset what important dates are still on the calendar so our listeners and subscribers know what to expect and then go ahead and set their calendars accordingly.
Will do. First, I'm going to give people a little insight into the inner workings of Inside Carolina. So, one, if I tweet something, I promise that
It's
no
all
matter
about
what,
recruiting. No, no, no,
I,
no. I'm stepping all over you right now because everybody knows all Sherrell does is eat, sleep, and breathe recruiting. You have trained them this way, and so they will act accordingly. No, I'm sorry, man. Go ahead.
the it, if something breaks, we will post it on the Inside Carolina message board first. That's the only place it will go. I will not tease anything or put anything of the utmost importance on my personal Twitter account. That's one. Two,
Cryptic tweets are not the way Terrell or the way Sherrell gets down.
correct. Two, I apologize if I seem tired or my eyes are red. I'm going to be 100% honest. Um, so we've been trying to get Harrison Ingram on an interview for a couple of days now, and he's in Palo Alto, California. He's on Sean's coast. And I guess, reality of the situation is that college kids are busy. And so did not expect to conduct an interview with him at about 12:55 a.m. Eastern time last night. So I was up late, no excuses, but I wanted to just provide that context. So that's a little background into how IC works. Um, so right now, where UNC is at, they've got the four commitments, as Joey said, from the portal. Uh, the portal will close in about 2 weeks. I think it's 16 days. So it's like May 11th, 12th, that range. The portal will close. That does not mean that anybody who's in the portal has to make a decision by then. It simply means that you have to put your name into the portal to say that you want to at least explore your opportunities of going somewhere else. From there, the combine, the NBA combine, I believe is that next week. So usually sometime around May 15th, May 16th. That's where all the guys go to Chicago and they get feedback from NFL, NBA GMs and coaches and scouts and just people in general. Their agents usually conduct kind of private workouts. That's sometimes where you see guys get quote unquote guarantees where they're playing and then all of a sudden it's like they're back at home and you're like, what happened? You're supposed to be here for 5 days, being here for two. From there, May 31st is kind of the other big deadline from a Carolina perspective. That is when the guys who are in the draft have maintained their college eligibility and want to come back have to announce that they're coming back. From there, again, no decision has to be made. There's not a deadline. So theoretically, someone could enter the portal on May 31st and say, I'm going to transfer to my new school. And they can make a decision as long as they're in good standing and enrolled at their school, when the fall semester starts. So they could take it into July, or, if they were really kind of a masochist, take it into August. So that's where things stand. Still a ways to go. And I think North Carolina is still kind of surveying the landscape to make sure they keep their options open.
Appreciate that reset. And we're going to go from Sherrell's, you know, eyelids propped open with spikes to Sean's emaciated and dehydrated Jordan flu game physique because he's been selling Buicks all night. So
I'm telling you, the coast to coast, we're here. We're playing dummy offense. We are not 100%,
hey,
but we're here.
If the game was tomorrow, we would not play. But we're here right now for practice, and that's no cap, Sherrell. How you like that? Sean,
On God.
on God, that is bussing. Sean, I want to ask you, what remaining needs does Hubert Davis's staff have for the roster next year? If they're identifying what to do with those two spots, I mean, there's still talk about potential reclass from Elliot Cadeau. Obviously, if a decision is made there, we will share that with folks as soon as we have it. And there's still two spots total left, and even if Cadeau were to reclass, that's still one spot left to fill with somebody. So I'm asking you, what does North Carolina need on the roster going into the summer?
I think there's two schools of thought. One is who do they need, and if you're looking at it from that perspective, I think athleticism on the wing is probably the main attribute. They have significantly upgraded shooting, basketball IQ, overall experience with the transfers they've gotten, but athleticism is not really a trait that you characterize with those players. I think once again, this isn't how you should define athleticism, but there was 11 dunks between the four transfers last year. So, they're not going above the rim all that often. So I think if they were able to get an athletic slashing wing, I think that would be the prototype, or that would be the position or the need for next year. Right now when you look at their roster, they you have the four transfers, Armando, RJ. You have the returning bench players in Chimble, Washington, Dunn, and then you have the freshmen in Wilshire and Zayden High. So even right there, you have 12 players, and I feel even with that, you're starting to get into how do you feed everybody, especially when you know RJ and Armando are going to be commanding significant minutes. You think the players returning uh, that are either going into their sophomore or junior seasons, they're not going to be content sitting on the bench, and the transfers that are coming through, given their experience and their age, they want to play as well. So I think you're already getting a lot of mouths to feed on this team. So roles will be really key in identifying how that happens. But once again, if you are dead set on adding somebody, it is somebody with athleticism on the wing, in my opinion.
Sean, does it concern you at all that North Carolina now doesn't have any other I guess depth in the post? I mean, Jalen Washington is probably going to play a lot of minutes. Armando Bacot is a true five. Aside from that, there's no depth. When Will Shaver transferred, a lot of people didn't really bat an eye at it, but he's a guy who largely was going to be that dude that helped make North Carolina's post players better until he became an upperclassman and earned some playing time. Does that concern you at all?
Yeah, I mean it does, especially given Armando's injury history. Obviously, he's a warrior, and what he plays through, I think, is above none. But he still, has to go through a full season healthy. Washington, obviously, is going to be most likely seeing increased playing time, and then Zayden High, just a freshman. So I think we've always talked about, hey, UNC, at least in the past under Roy Williams, was best when they, had a legit 7-8, but then you got guys 9 and 10 who maybe weren't part of the regular rotation, but whether it's injury or foul trouble, you were fine watching them come in. So mention athletic wing. I mean, that was the other thought going through my head. Is it, could there be another 5-4-4-5? But once again, when you have Armando starting, you have Washington that is looking for increased playing time. I think that could be a tough sell. Withers as well. He played five as a freshman. I don't think he's trying to do that again, even though that was his most efficient season. But um, I would be surprised if that's the position that they look to fill. But I think it certainly is a concern given some of the injury history we've seen.
Sherrill, any indication which way the staff is leaning with his last two scholarships? You don't need. I'm not necessarily asking for people as much as I am. Do you have any sense as to what sorts of player types, I guess, for lack of a better term, they might be looking for?
Yeah, I think the athletic wing is kind of at the tops of the list right now because it's kind of the one thing they don't have. Um, it's just to Sean's point, it's very hard to kind of talk someone into coming and saying you can play, be the backup five here, but the backup five is probably not going to play that much, and there's a reasonable chance that you're actually the backup five, because I think Jalen Washington's going to play there a good amount. Probably the majority of his minutes will be there. So yeah, I think it's that athletic, tallish wing who can shoot. I know that sounds like a unicorn, but they've gotten to the point now with the way the roster is that it's more of a want than 100% need moving forward. Because I do think Simeon Wilcher can help in that regard. I think Cormac Ryan will help in that regard, even though they aren't your prototypical 6'8" kind of small forward. They are both 6'5" ish and can play, I think, multiple positions. So they're covered just in case, but they're always out there looking for more. But of the two, definitely the tallest wing.
A couple of weeks ago, Inside Carolina subscribers and UNC fans in general were chewing their fingernails down to the quick, trying to figure out who's going to end up on the roster. And now they're at a place where they're looking for, wants as opposed to needs. And if you're thinking about wants and needs for your wardrobe, I'd call Johnny T-shirt. You could go visit Johnny T-shirt. Check out Johnny T-shirt on the web. They're on the old internet, www.johnnytshirt.com. They will take care of you. Right now, if you're starting to look towards summertime, maybe you want to be like, left coast Sean over there, looking really fab in your board shorts, right? I'm sure Johnny T-shirt can probably take care of you there with some UNC branded board shorts. I'm not sure if you want to go the Tommy Ashley route and rock the banana hammock like he does, trying to be all European when he's down there at Atlantic Beach. I don't know if Johnny T-shirt can help you there, but if they can't, then you probably don't need a UNC branded banana hammock. But maybe Tommy Ashley can tell you how he got his or which catalog from Johnny T-shirt he got his in. Either way, Johnny T-shirt are your people. They're IC's people. We hope that you'll take care of them, show them some love the way they have always supported Inside Carolina with our content. We appreciate them and hope that you will appreciate them as well. Take a quick second, let the national guys come in here and run some ads. We'll be right back to talk about all of the prep action from this past weekend and give you updated on the recruiting side of things for UNC basketball here on the Coast to Coast podcast. All right, fellas. As this past weekend came and went, there was a lot of prep ball going on because it was the first live period where coaches could go see guys playing in their different AAU environments. Inside Carolina had your very favorite Sherrell McMillan was in Atlanta at the EYBL event down there. We also had some help from 24/7's guys who were out at the Adidas event. And there's just a lot to talk about here. So start first with Drake Powell. I think it has to start there because he had such a great weekend for himself. Last week, Sean and Sherrell both said they were looking forward to see how he handled carrying that fifth star and seeing how that burden fit with him. But y'all, I'm not one to exaggerate here. I've known Sherrell since he was knee high to a duck, right? Like since Moses wore short pants, I have known Sherrell McMillan. He has rarely been a guy that runs out of ways to discuss a recruit. And I'm here to tell you, as we sit on late April 2023, Sherrell is running out of ways to discuss his impressions of Drake Powell. Sherrell, I'm going to you first. You got to see Drake Powell play, and again, talking to you off the record, you seemed really jacked about him. So I guess I'm kind of putting that out there. But I want you to say, what was the first thing that jumped out at you in seeing him play versus the last time you saw him play?
He was noticeably bigger. Talked to some people who were there, who were close to him, and they talked about his work ethic, especially in the weight room, and just how he's trying to transform his body from kind of a slender, lanky kid to like a muscular, lanky kid. And it was definitely pretty obvious, the first time he stepped onto the court. So full disclosure, I only watched part of his first game. That Friday night, I was more focused on Elliot Cadeau because unfortunately, all of the Carolina commits and targets played at the exact same time. They all played at 5:30. And so it was just either not be focused on one thing and not really be able to glean anything, or just focus on one part and just miss out. So we decided to focus on Cadeau. But for the rest of the weekend, we were focused 100% on Drake Powell and just did not disappoint, man. I mean, there were I think the way we said it in the premium scoop, which feel free to go back and look at the eval period. I know Sean's a fan of those, just kind of seeing how things happen and who they watched and how the guys performed. What Powell's been able to do is he kept his strengths strong and turned his weaknesses into strengths. And so when you do that, you start to talk about players as being close to complete. I don't think he's there yet, but whereas he used to, the first thing people would say about Drake Powell was like, "Oh yeah, he's an athlete, very good defensively, but just can't shoot, can't score. What is he going to do at the next level? Guys, they're going to leave him wide open. He's not going to be able to hit shots." Well, now he's a proficient shot maker. He's always had the handle, I think, to play, to be able to dribble in traffic and lead breaks and everything. But now the jump shot is coming around, and now the pull-up jump shot is coming around. There were so many times where he would come off of a screen or a curl, get the ball, jab step one or two times, two quick dribbles, pull-up jumper from mid-range, good. There were several times he was wide open in the corner, pull-up jump shot from three, good. There are several times where he'd come off that screen, uh, kind of jab step, take two dribbles, step back, three, good. So he's got everything in the arsenal. He'd come off of that curl, pump fake, jab and drive all the way to the rim and either finish through traffic or get to the free throw line. So he's displaying an offensive game that has matured considerably, I would say, over the last year, considerably, rapidly, um, superly, which is not really a word, but it's been impressive to watch. And then the defense has always been there. The defense is always something he's done in an elite level. But now that the offense is catching up with the defense, they're fueling each other, and you're getting a player who really is ascending. And I think ascending is the correct word. I think it was the word we used when he committed, that this is a player whose trajectory was on the way up. And I just didn't know it was going to be from, the mid 70s to the 30s to 19 to very likely in the top 10 in the next, couple of months. That's not far-fetched at all. I don't think it's wrong at all. I'm not a guy who does rankings. Obviously, I have my opinions, but there's not 10 better players in the class than Drake Powell.
Those are big words from a guy that doesn't use hyperbole very often. Sean, you talked, and again, if I'm misquoting you here, please speak up. But you talked a couple of times on this show after Drake Powell committed that he was kind of a jack of all trades. I think you used Swiss Army knife as a term a couple of times. Um, what does it mean for him to take this kind of jump to where now not only does he have this well-rounded game, but he's become, you know, extremely reliable in getting his own shot and scoring? What does that do for him, and what does that do for North Carolina in adding him to the roster?
Well, I think it's pretty rare in terms of what he's been able to do. I think a lot of time when you see young athletic wings, not really the best jump shot, you kind of always talk about, hey, they need to improve their jump shot. But for the most part, it's pretty hard to transform your game. So the fact that he has been able to do that, and where Sherrell's going through all those moves that he had. I mean, this time last year, you weren't saying that about him. And this also goes to, got to give credit to UNC and their coaching staff. They identified the wing as a need in the 2024 class really early. Jaron Stevenson was obviously the first offer, but then they really focused on the wings. And once they offered Drake in the summer, and once he committed, that was it. He was the guy. Which having just seen him at EYBL, I was a little questioned a little bit, but that was obviously proven uh, proven pretty apt in terms of the observation. And to be able to not only play defense, rebound, but now kind of have that go-to scoring role, especially on a EYBL team and a team that did really well. Once again, it's the first weekend. There's many more to go, but to your point, that was a question we both had coming into this weekend. We saw what he did in high school. I think even seeing him on video in high school from in person, and just that aggressiveness that he showed and the improvement jumped off the screen. So could he do that against more athletic, bigger players? And that was certainly evident as he was the MVP of the first weekend in Nike.
And just a couple of things to add for context. So it's not like he was playing the B circuit of EYBL. One of his matchups was against a guy named Caleb Wilson, who I think we'll talk about and Carolina fans should probably become familiar with. He's a 2025 wing from Georgia. When I say wing, I mean of the 6'8.5", 6'9" variety, who's long arms and it's just difficult to guard. And him and Powell had a pretty impressive matchup, and Powell kept them under wraps, for most of the game. There's another matchup with Carter Bryant, who I think by the time you listen to this, should be committed to a certain school. I won't name the school that most people think he's going to, but he's ranked as one of the five best players in the 2024 class, and he did nothing. Obviously, it's not a one-on-one matchup, but that was the game. I think Powell had 28, 24, 8, and 6, and didn't play in the final 5 minutes. And Bryant just didn't have anything for Powell. So he's playing the best players in his class and in other classes and kind of dominating. And CP3, there's no question whose team it is. To give people some additional context, it goes back to something that Roy Williams talked about with Marvin Williams back in the day. He was like, and obviously some of this is tongue in cheek and probably exaggerated, but the story goes that Roy, was obviously enamored by Marvin Williams' size and his ability to shoot and all the things that he could do. But what really sold him is that one day he saw him getting Gatorade for his teammates and sweeping up the floor. And honestly, Tyler Gilbert, shout out to him. He's an IC poster. He's been around for a long time. He was sitting beside me. He said, "Rel, look." And I was like, "What?" They were up by 22, I think. And there's Drake Powell getting Gatorade for his teammates. So um, just interesting, fun to see that he kind of embodies everything that they are looking for. And he's also a really, really, really good basketball player.
See, that's the type of stuff that Roy Williams will come out of retirement and label Drake Powell a tough little nut just for things like that, because that's absolutely something he would have eaten up. And I'm glad you shared that story about the Marvin Williams Gatorade slash water kid stuff, because that is legendary. Speaking of legendary, let's get on our hot pants. Talk a little bit about James Brown playing for a new team this past weekend in Mocan Elite. Sean, your first takeaways from Brown in a new environment?
I mean, I think it's always tough going from kind of a team and playing, Mean Streets is a Chicago team, so you're familiar with the guys and going to a new team and fitting in. Also, I think we've been talking about one and done or top 10 5-star players in the 2024 class with Cadeau, Jackson, and now Powell. And obviously James Brown is not in that. But I think once again, from when you're looking at a big that can grow and develop, I think he kind of fits in that mold. Last year he was also playing on the 16, similar to Powell, playing on that 16 under circuit with Mean Streets, and did, I'd say, pretty solid. But I think once again that jump to 17s always can can come at people pretty quick. But I think he adjusted pretty well during this one. Obviously wasn't Sherrell's top focus with Cadeau and Powell there, but going to look forward, especially this weekend, playing another tournament and then going into May to see how he continues to do playing with that new team. Obviously going to Link Academy next year, which will have him playing on a national schedule, and just continuing to see how he develops with his strength and mid-range jump shot.
Sherrell, anything that you're looking for specifically to see James Brown add to his arsenal? Because again, we had him on here and he was amazing, just a great interview, but interviewing doesn't necessarily pay the bills for the kid in the future. So what do you think he needs to be working on this summer with his new squad?
Well, I think everything, just becoming a overall better basketball player. And that was, to Sean's point, the purpose for him going to Link Academy in Branson. And I'll say this too, he's been there for 3 weeks. So he went ahead and started now because he goes to, he went to St. Rita. And so it's not like a public deal where he has to wait until the season ends and all that good stuff. So he's been in Missouri for a good month now. And you can tell that it is definitely basketball, studying, and nothing else, because he also looks noticeably different physically. Like I told him, I was like, you kind of look skinny now, man. He's lost a good amount of weight. There's a lot more definition in his shoulders. Just can tell that, he's in a more mature program as far as weightlifting and all that good stuff. So that's good to see. Um, from on the court perspective, to Sean, like Sean said, it's just tough when you're starting with a new team. This was their first weekend. It's the first time kind of live action, for lack of a better phrase. They played a couple of tune-up games, but nothing like what they saw. And we'll have a story on him at the end of the weekend, but I think he's accepting his situation and he's working to change it. So right now he comes off the bench. He's not playing a ton. Mocan is a team that's notorious for having 3 or 4 really tall guys on the team at all times, and so they rotate. And right now he's starting from the back of that rotation. He's having to earn a spot, and I think he'll do that. But it does take time. So I think it says a lot about how he wants to improve as a player that um, he admitted it was like, yeah, I'm not used to this, but it's something that I've accepted and I'm working to change through my play and through my hard work and everything. So that's where he's at. I think we'll see where he's at probably in a month after the third and fourth sessions to see how his play has changed or improved.
It's incredibly wise and I guess grounded perspective from a kid of his age. The next one I want to talk about, and this is only because he was kind of off the beaten path. Sherrell, you didn't get a chance to see him, but UNC coaches did lay eyes on Captain Jack Ian Jackson this weekend as the New York Whiz Kids played in the 3SB event for Adidas. What can you tell us about how Jackson did? As the highlights look great, but again, I'm just a dude watching highlights. Sherrell, what did you think of Jackson's weekend?
Yeah, so at the beginning we were getting reports that like maybe he wasn't playing his best, and then Adam Finkelstein, he had a huge game in front of him. I think that was Saturday morning. That was a 35-point game where um, a lot of the highlights came from. I think with Jackson, he's another player. We tend to do this. I say we, the basketball community writ large, but evaluators kind of tend to do this where a player is elevated very early and then they spend the next 2 years just nitpicking it to death. Like, oh, that left hand dribble isn't quite at 45 degrees like I wanted, or oh, that jump shot, there's just a slight variation on it from time to time. So I'm gonna deduct points. So it's it's kind of that next level evaluation where they already know he's a great player, and so now it's going through and figuring out, what's the next thing, what's the next step, how does he get better, how does he continue to improve, how does he, keep from being static and continue to be more dynamic. So without being there, that's kind of the impression we got. I think that game where he played really well kind of satiated the evaluators for now. The other thing that I think was really important about how UNC approached things is that Hubert Davis was at Adidas the entire time. And I'm 100% certain that I guess this is 23 years now of doing this and covering this since I was in college, there's never been a time where the UNC head coach, majority of that time was Roy Williams, all but 2 years, didn't attend a Nike event on a particular weekend. This is the first time it's ever happened. And I think that tells you one, Hubert Davis is open to trying new things. Two, that they want to make sure that Ian Jackson sees them and sees them a lot. And that three, the overall talent, top end talent on Adidas is better especially in 2025, is better than it's been in a few years.
We'll talk about that 2025 class in just a second. Sean, Ian Jackson, again, has been, like Sherrell said, highly rated for quite some time. Is it just becoming to where he's an automatic, jump shooter that you want to see from him? What's the one thing you want to see him do this summer?
Well, I think like you, I was mostly watching highlights of him, so not sure of any of the stats or what he looked like. Adidas is a little needs some improvement in terms of just some of that aspect of their program. But yeah, I think 3-point shooting is what you want to see early on in his high school career. That was probably his biggest deficiency. But even last year, you saw a big jump. Getting to see him at his last Adidas tournament, you could easily see that improvement in person. And I think that has continued through the high school season, et cetera. There's still definitely some things to work through in terms of most likely efficiency as he gets older. But I think you could see his ability to shoot off the dribble, off the catch, as well as even defensively some of the shot blocks he had, showcasing that length and athleticism.
Yeah, the highlight package that has been floating around the message boards. I mean, he's blocking dunks, and I don't care who you are, it's impressive. All right, Sherrell, the last one. We'll start trying to wind down the show for this week. Elliot Cadeau, and I know again his highlight reels have become quite catchy, for lack of a better term, the last couple of weeks. Um, yeah, it seemed like you can't go anywhere without seeing an Elliot Cadeau highlight reel right now. So you got a chance to see him up close and personal, as you mentioned on Friday night. You did a sit down, just talking to the kid. Tell me what you think about his weekend and just what you came away feeling about his game and where he's positioned for the coming summer.
Yeah, the only reason I don't think the rave of how good Cadeau was came through is just because Powell was amazing this weekend too. And the same thing with Jackson is I think what we're seeing with Cadeau. He's been kind of that guy for so long that it's when he does kind of wild stuff, it's just like, oh, that's what Ellie Cadeau's supposed to do. But the passing is just incredible. The feel is incredible. He's just a player who knows what to do, when to do it, and I think a lot of it is just innate. You know, we asked him in the one-on-one story, like, how did you develop into such a great passer? He's like, I don't really know. I just kind of always been able to do it, and that goes for people who believe the whole, point guards are born, not made thing. That is evidence for your case. So. Uh, those are impressive. I think he averaged around 11 assists per game. He averaged a couple of steals per game, so that shows you his ability defensively, especially with moving his feet and that kind of thing. It was definitely something I was watching, considering what may or may not happen in the next few months. How could he guard taller, stronger guards? And I think the way he tries to do it, one, he kind of gets into them, for lack of a better term, kind of is in their space. And then if they try to go around him, he does have the lateral quickness to usually stay with people. Now, what happens when people try to post him up? I think that's something that whenever he gets to UNC, they'll have to figure out. But defensively, I felt better about him defensively after this weekend than I did before the weekend started. Everything else, he shot 50% from three. It was only on 8 attempts, I believe, but that was a question mark. People were saying, well, can he shoot? Can he score? I go back to what someone close to the program said back when he committed. It was basically like he can score when he has to or when he needs to, but he chooses to get other people involved. I'll give people this from the one-on-one. Uh, he said a lot of people want to play with him. I was like, you kind of know the answer, but do you want to get his take? I was like, well, why do people want to play with you? He was like, because 100 times out of 100, if it's me and a teammate on the fast break, I'm throwing the lob. And I think that tells you his mindset and how he attacks the game. And again, for the 646 times, that's just something that Carolina hasn't had that mentality in some time.
Sean, you've been on the Cadeau is ready train for quite some time. Is there anything that can make you more on that train? Are you more on that train? Do you still feel like, yeah, bring him to college now? And are you still convinced?
I'm definitely not off the train. I think he's shown what he can do. I think there's always an adjustment once you do get to the college level, but between the experience he's had and his age and just the gift he has passing the ball, I don't see any reason why he does need to do another year in high school.
All right. So that wraps the 4 UNC commits that played in the evaluation period this past weekend. Next one starts this weekend. Is that correct, Sherrell?
Correct.
All
So
right.
Adidas and Nike and Under Armour all have events beginning Friday. It escapes me where Adidas is. Under Armour is in Rock Hill, South Carolina, and then Nike is in the Phoenix metro area.
All right. So after this past weekend, we learned of two brand new offers out to 25 players, or a class of 25 players, I should say. Koa Pete from the Compton Magic is a power forward, 6'8", 210. Kid actually lives in Arizona. And also Darren Peterson from Phenom United. He's a shooting guard out of Cuyahoga Falls, Ohio. Shout out to Tommy Boy. And he's 6'5", 195. Sean, give me a brief synopsis on each one of these kids' games, because I know you've seen Koa Pete a couple of times in person, but just give us the quick snapshot of these two guys so that our listeners will be familiar with them.
Yeah, I'll start with Peterson. I think it was probably pretty clear that with Hubert Davis spending so much time at Adidas that there would be some offers, especially with the 2024 class in really good shape, that those would be coming down and the focus. So Peterson, really talented, currently number 6 in 24/7, but that side, it's been a while since UNC has had a true shooting guard like that, and 6'5" size, the ability to, for lack of better words, score at all three levels. Probably one of Sherrell's favorite words, but he's really impressive to watch. He's been followed from a very young age, so he was receiving offers even before he got into high school. But I think right now in terms of improvement points, fairly right hand dominant, but when he gets in the lane at 6'5" and with that length, you better watch out. And he has a really strong mid range game and good looking jump shot. So excited to track him as we go. And Koa Pete, he's a guy who's been on the scene, especially out here playing for the Compton Magic, that have been reading about well before he came into high school. I think after his 8th grade year, he was at the Pangos event, made a big mark going up against all the rising seniors. And then this past summer, he was, I think, the youngest player to ever make the USA U17 basketball team. So, he's just kind of a physical freak. Last year when I saw him, I had to do a double take just because he was playing on the 17-year-old level, and he was the biggest, pretty much the biggest guy on the court. Really talented, kind of a 4 that can get up and down the floor, can attack, can shoot it. But I think shooting, especially from outside, needs to clean that up a little bit and get, that'll probably be his main area. And once again, not kind of resting on the laurels of where he's at right now, but continuing to improve and make that jump everybody thinks he will be making over the next few years.
Awesome. Good stuff. I appreciate the insight, Sean, especially since you've been able to see Koa Pete in person. It's hard for Sherrell and I, since we're anchored down here in Cackalack, to be able to see those guys. Okay. That should do it for tonight. I'm going to give you guys a chance to throw in your 2 pennies before we get out of here. Sean, I know you've got baby duty to jump into, so 2 cents before you leave us.
Same as last time. I'm just excited to see what Drake Powell does in week number 2. New teammate was added. People will be kind of gunning for him, maybe a little bit more so.
Mm-hmm.
So looking forward to how he does in week 2. Also seeing who else from the 2025 class gets offers, especially with Hubert Davis being at Nike most likely.
For sure. Sherrell, 2 cents for us before we get out of here tonight.
To Sean's point, Caleb Wilson seems primed as someone that they will evaluate and could have an offer by this time next week, since Hubert Davis will be at Nike. And then I would say just everyone check out the Inside the Commitment story on Harrison Ingram. I think you'll find his quotes enlightening about what he was told and how the whole process of him entering the portal and ending up at UNC about 2 weeks later happened.
Yeah, man, you don't need me to gas you up. That really was well done, regardless of what time of day you did that. Fellas, appreciate it as always. You guys always bring the heat, regardless of how tired or dehydrated you might be. So I'm thankful for you being here. Shout out to Johnny T-Shirt for sponsoring the show. Shout out to John Siegley for producing the show. I am just Joey Powell, the host. Until next time, we'll catch you all right back here on the Coast to Coast podcast from InsideCarolina.com.